So now the official Rayfire tutorial is finished, but I just want to go through my shading, lighting and rendering steps so you can get the final animation. I just want to show you how I shaded and lighted my scene to get it more or less look like this. So first of all, I select all my glass pieces and assign them to a new shader. So right click, assign shader, Vray material, and then I go to my settings for that and call this one VR for Vray and just call that glass. A standard glass shader is black. It has a reflection with Fresnel on and refraction, and you want effect shadows on too. You can also use dispersion, but that would destroy my render times. That's a simple glass shader, and for the frame I just assign another shader which is called framing. So I just select by name star frame star, oh capital F probably. All my frames are selected, right click, new Vray material, call this one Vray frame. This should be a white plastic, so I make them almost white, give them a reflection with a Fresnel effect and a bit of glossiness. Also I want these glasses to be with the same shader, so star glass star. It's now selecting all my glass. I want to add existing glass shader to them, so they are being added as well. And the windowsill should also be the white frame material, and the rest is the wall and the floor, which I want to be like a bit more rough texture. So select ceiling, what's this one called? Wall. So star wall, all my walls are being selected, and I want to give them also a new Vray shader, call this one Vray wall, and look for a nice texture for them. File node. Okay, I just found the path for the texture. It says here, I can view that, or I can't. It's ref 06. Looks like this, it's just like a soft wall shader. And I want this to be on everything else, so the ceiling, the walls and everything else. There is still my rest of the cubes hidden, but I just add this to everything else as well. And I still have to UV map them because they are more or less like a box. I can just select all my objects and all my walls first, and then all my cubes, and then I go to where is it? Create UVs, automatic mapping, 6 sides and project. So now my textures should be mapped more or less correctly. I want to add a environment light or a reflection. First of all, I have to set it to Vray, go to my environment and add a GI texture, which is found in my HDRI resources. So I just copied my path out of Explorer and paste them in here. And now in my hypershade I want to copy the file node to my reflection and refraction. So this is my hypershade. Go to my textures and the file 2, I want to middle mouse drag it to reflection and refraction, and probably just in the background as well, so I can see that in my viewport. And I also want to add my texture node to my bump node in here as well, so the wall is a bit more uneven and not so smooth. So I go to my file 1 node, which is my wall, and copy that to my map and just change the multiply to 0.2 or something. Oh, it's even still too high. Something like this. And then in my render settings, I just increase this value so my render is a bit faster. Got linear workflow enabled. I want to enable my GI on very low settings. And now I go into my camera. I frame my window where I want it to be, more or less something like this. I then quickly save my scene because I always like just to save my scenes before rendering, because rendering sometimes or more often crashes Maya. So now I go to my render view setup, look into my camera, and my settings are at 1280, so for test renderings I just render 50%, right click and render the render cam. So this is now what my render looks like. You can see the wall, first of all, is, or the texture is way too big. So I go into my projection node, into my texture node, and increase my repeatedness, let's say to 6 and 6. And let's see what it looks like now. Okay, it's better now. Now probably the bump is a bit too heavy still, so just decrease the value again. And I want the wall to be a bit more reflective. With Fresnel turned on, increase my reflection, and I want to go to my hypershade again and just frame the material and add a hue. What was it? Remap HSV. I want my file node to go into here, and the color should go, or the remap HSV should go to my diffuse. So now I have more control on the shade or the color of that, so I can decrease my saturation for that. So you can see now my rendered sphere here is not so saturated anymore, and you can just increase the whiteness for that to something like this. So now let's see what my render looks like now. It's a nice, more or less whitish wall. You can see Final Gather isn't working properly, but that's okay. So now I have to rotate my background so it's a bit more appealing in my view. So let's see if we can see that in the viewport. Yeah, you can, but it's not displaying correctly. But let's see, I can probably rotate, oh, now it's updated. So you can now rotate your background so you get a bit more or a better view. Where's my buildings? There you go. So now you can see the buildings, the trees, and let's say I first of all change my aspect ratio to, let's say, 25, so it's a bit more fisheye. I can see a bit more detail. So now rotating my background again, you can choose whatever IBL you want. I just use this one now. I like the view of that because you can see the houses in the background and some trees and a huge grass area where probably some kids could play. Save again and render my camera. There you go, this is now what it looks like now. Unhide my Rayfire sim, render again. And now you can see my glass in here as well. It's looking already pretty nice. So now you want to get a nice bowl in here. I have some time ago modeled a ball, so I just have to import it again. Import ball, and now I want to fit my animated ball, so I just isolate my both balls, two of my balls, and going back to my view, I just want to line them up so they fit, and then I will constrain them. Make this a bit bigger, and then I want to select my master ball, the master soccer ball, this one here. Go into my animation menu, constrain, and go to parent, and then I select the other one with shift, and then I just add it and hide the simulated ball. So what I did now is link my imported sphere to my simulated sphere. So now the ball should follow in animation everything else. And I used this one because it was UV mapped, so I can just plug in a texture node to that. And I go to Vray material, rename the shader for that, call this one ball, and in here I have my ball texture. I will then make it reflective with Fresnel again, reduce it a bit that it's a bit more shiny, something like this. And now I go back into my camera perspective, turn off isolation, and let's see what it looks like now. Okay, now we have a nice soccer ball in here. What I think now is that the room is way too dark, so I have to add some more lights. And in the end I have also to add my box. Let's see what it looks like in the camera, because now I get a bit more bounces in my room, so it's probably already lighter or even darker. Let's see. It's probably way too dark. Okay, so I definitely have to add some lights. So to do that, I go into my top view and go to my create menu, lights, V-Ray, rectangular light, scale it up and rotate it 90. And you can use one large one, but I just use several smaller ones to get a bit more breaks in my reflections. There you go, so it's now 3 lights. I want them all to be invisible. I probably don't want them to be that intense, so let's just put them to 2. Go into my side view, position them on top, and let's see what the render looks like. Okay, because my room is now very reflective, you can see the reflections on the wall, which is definitely not right. So go into the material, make it way more rougher, and now it should be gone. The ball is probably also too glossy, and just make it a bit more rough, not so many reflections. And now I can increase my threshold or decrease it to get a bit more detailed render. Okay, after the render is done, you can see that I get a way more detail in my reflections and on the render itself. If you want to also add this nice time warp effect, what I just did is, I just rather do it quickly now. I just selected my camera, went to this window or something like this, the beginning, hit Shift W for setting keyframes. Oops, so you have first to select your camera. Now you've got some keyframes to here, and then what I did is move my camera over here and hit Shift W again, so I get this camera which is moving. You can now adjust the position of the camera, which I will do now in the window animation graph editor. You can see your curves, and if by pressing shift and middle mouse you can move your keyframes. So I just want the translation to something about here, so when it's being shattered my camera is in the debris area and then moves out. So if you want to enable the time warping effect, which is a pretty cool effect, you can go to window, or you just set your menu to animation, go to animation, scene time warp, and add a scene time warp and enable it. If not, you can go to animate and select the scene time warp, and then you can see it's a linear curve, which shows you that the time warp is just linear, so there is actually no time warp happening. So I just tear off a copy and middle mouse my camera in here, so I've got a bit more screen, and now you see that my view is updated. If I now add some keyframes in here, and I add one more, and here also one more, and I just move this one down, what you will see is that time is being slowed down on this path here. So if I move this one here, it's a bit trial and error now, but actually it's working. If you get it to look nice or to set them up correctly, it's looking really nice later on. So this has a value of 60 and this one has one of 62. Let's put it to 61, and let's make this one flat and this one as well flat. So now we should almost get a freezing effect. This one should be linear right here, so let's see. Okay, it's still not enabled. You have to probably enable it now. So now something is happening. So let's see, playback, and it's frozen, but obviously it's not in the correct position. So you can select all your keyframes and just move them upwards until you have them at the correct position. Okay, it's a bit too late. Let's see what's now. Okay, now if I play back my animation on my camera, see it's moving, crashing, time warping, and continuing. Obviously you have to adjust your keyframes for smoother transitions, something like this, and now it's a bit more smoother, freezing, and then animating again. So this is a pretty easy way to get some nice time warping effects. And the rest I did in After Effects. I exported a locator where I want the sun to be somewhere here in the back, and then I used optical flares to create a nice flaring effect. And I also, what I did for my final animation, I used a motion blur, which you can turn on the camera, motion blur, and then you have to adjust the frames for the effect, how exaggerated or how you can see the blurring effect. Here's a sampling, increase that and you get very smooth blurry or motion blur effects. And also what I did is set this one to medium in animation so I don't get a lot of flickering. And that's about it for my rendering, and I won't show you the composing part because that would be just too much. I hope you did enjoy this tutorial, and I hope you also did learn something from it. If you like my tutorials, please subscribe to my channel to be always up to date and get new videos I intend to create at least one or maybe two a month, so be sure to be subscribed and always get the latest tutorials from me. Thank you guys.